Well, hey, everybody. I'm super excited that I have my friend Anthony Damaschino here on the podcast. Hi, Anthony.
Hi, Kay. I'm so excited to be here. Thank you for having me.
My pleasure. And it is with good nature here on the Pursue Your Spark podcast. At Pursue Your Spark, we're diving right in. And my first question for you is, can you share an example of when you ignited your spark and took action to pursue your spark?
Gosh, igniting my spark. I'm a very goal-oriented person, right? So I think throughout my life, there's been little sparks here and there of, should I run a marathon? Can I hike Mount Everest with my son, right? I think there's the personal sparks and goals I've gone after. And then, obviously there've been career sparks. I think my most recent spark, which is going to be your most recent spark, is writing the book, right? So you have a book coming out. I've published two. I think for me, finding a creative outlet at this point in our lives, doing something completely different, that we haven't done before, that's been really exciting and new.
Yeah. And it sparked to write a book. You're not a writer to begin with. Am I correct?
Yeah, no. I don't have an English major, or I'm not a journalist or anything like that. No.
So you just sat down and said, heck, I'm going to write about the book about empty nesting, which is our topic for the day. How did that start?
Yeah, like many parents, I have gone through that stage, right? And I was going through that stage. I have three children. My eldest son left for college, and I still had two daughters in high school. And what I was noticing with friends who were ahead of me, right? Their kids were leaving, or the kids had already left, is there tended to be some marriage tension, let's say. I felt like some of them were lost. Like, what am I doing now? I'm a parent. And I started realizing that a lot of my life revolves around my kids. Great. I'm going to get a trophy for Father of the Year. But what I also realized is some of the other things I was neglecting, like taking care of myself physically, paying attention to my spouse. It was family first, children first. Let's get this goal. Let's get them out of high school. Let's get them off to college or out of the house. And so when I started realizing that that was coming, I felt like I was not prepared for that transition. And so I looked for books. I didn't really find anything that resonated with me. A lot of the empty nest books out there are kind of religious. And so, and I'm kind of non-denominational. So I thought I would dive in, do some research, and then that ended up in just following a passion to write.
I love it because one of the things that attracted me to have you as a guest on the show is to have the perspective from a guy, the male perspective on empty nesting. There is a lot of empty nesting information out there. And actually, the Pursue Your Spark, my brand, was initially at some point along the line called The Empty Nest. And for me, it was just a phase in life that I went through, and I was like, I don't want to keep going back, revisiting this in my brand. We were looking forward, and that's how Pursue Your Spark came to be.
Yeah.
But it is that phase in our lives where there's a lot going on, like you just mentioned. And you call the empty nest phase the most underrated phase in a parent's life. Why do so many miss that potential?
Yeah, I think, you're single and young, let's just say. When you're single and young, it's focusing on being single and young and perhaps meeting someone. Then it's focused on a marriage, and then maybe you have children, and then you're focusing on those children, and you're focusing on a career because we all need to make money and pay our bills. And then while you're focusing on your career, most people start focusing on retirement, right? So they're in a 401k, or they're thinking about either a magic number or a magic age when they're going to make that transition. But there isn't really a time, I think, when people are really focusing or thinking about the empty nest transition in their lives. there's getting married, there's coupling, there's children, there's retirement, but there is this midlife phase that we all go through as parents that I just felt was not really acknowledged or talked about. And in fact, like I thought it was kind of, it would it's a joke. You go to a party and someone says, "Hey, your kids are leaving. Huh, you making their room into a yoga studio?" It's almost like a punchline, but there is a lot of emotional things going on with men and women, parents in general, and single and couples that I really didn't wasn't prepared for. I didn't know anything about it, and so I think this phase deserves some attention.
Absolutely. Some parents feel the relief that the kids are gone. They're finally, oh, we can just have sex in every room of the house now, and we can run around naked without anything. But others feel really lost. And what, in your opinion, determines how we handle this emptiness transition, whether it be, oh, yay, party time, or oh my God, I'm just so lost.
Yeah, I think awareness is the first thing, right? Realize that this phase is coming. Realize that your relationship with your household, your daily routine will change when your children leave. Your relationship with your child will change when they leave. If you have a spouse, that relationship will change as well. Um, and maybe it is all magical and wonderful, and I can walk around in my boxers now, and and do whatever I want, and my wife and I will be, you know, having wine every night and cheering. But for me, it wasn't that way. There was some emotional loss, and there was some sadness with my children leaving. And so I feel like anything, being aware that you need to retire when you get older is one thing, but taking action to make sure you have the money to retire and you're investing and you're setting yourself up for retirement is totally different than just blindly moving forward. And I think people blindly move into this phase where just being more aware and then preparing themselves for it mentally and even physically, right? I think that's the recommendation. That's the purpose of the book.
So tell me a story about how you felt when one of your kids left.
Sure. I'll tell you two, but I'm going to tell this kind of in reverse order. So one is my daughter, my youngest daughter, graduated from school in June. She's been back in my house for the last 9 months, and she just left last Saturday. So she's 23 years old. This is the second time I've become an empty nester because she boomeranged back, as many children do, because it's expensive to live in this world we live in. Uh, and so she has been gone a week. And so I was prepared for her to leave. I was excited for her to go because she needs to go be a 23-year-old, live in San Francisco, have roommates, have fun. She needs to live her life, right? And my wife and I can't be her center of, dinner and going out and fun. She needs to go be a 23-year-old. But but this week there have been moments when I want to share something, or something happened to me during the day, or she was walking with me at night, and she obviously wasn't this week. So there've been these little moments of gosh, she's not here. And yes, I could pick up the phone, I could text her. Um, but it's not the same, right? When you're living with someone, they're part of your ecosystem, they're part of your routine, and she's gone. So once again, the realization hit me this week that I am once again an empty nester. And, there is some emotion with it. I mean, I'm prepared, obviously, and I've written 2 books on it, but it's still, I mean, it's still a transition and a change.
My kids did the same thing. My son moved out, went to Johns Hopkins here in Maryland, and he kept coming back every weekend because he needed change to wash his laundry.
Yeah.
And he didn't have the change for the laundry. So he kept coming back and forth and back and forth. And I would say, well, are you in college now or you're not in college? And it was hard for him too, the transition. That's why he
Yes.
kept coming back. And he was like, this roommate was smoking weed and he didn't know anybody. And so it was really safe for them to come home and do their thing. And I'm like, finally, hey, you need to go. You need to go.
Yeah.
But it's also, I feel, Anthony, that each time it's like it was for me as a mom. a little heartbreak. It's like
Yeah.
they're back for a little bit and you can connect and do your thing and then they leave.
Yeah.
But then they're back.
Yeah.
And it's to me, as much as I foster their independence for both of my kids, it still was every time a little heartbreak.
It is a balance, and I am fortunate because both of my eldest son and now my youngest daughter are 40 minutes away, 25, 30 minutes away across a bridge in San Francisco. Great. My daughter is down south about 3.5 hours. But so I do get to see them more. They can get here. I really feel sorry for parents who, they have a child in Washington, a child in Florida, and a child in New Hampshire, and they're living in Texas, right? So that is rough. And then you're going to see your child what, two, maybe three times a year if you're lucky in that scenario. Heartbreak does come with that. I mean,
Yeah.
you love seeing these people who are such a part of your life. And then, even when they leave after Christmas break or coming, it is hard. It's once again, you struggle a little.
Yeah. Yeah. Your book blends research, personal experience, and real life stories. Was there a particular story that changed how you see the empty nest phase?
Uh, you know, I don't know about you, Heike, but my departure with my parents was completely different than my departure with my children, right? My parents, I went off to college. I rented a U-Haul with a friend. I packed up. There were no college visits with my parents. My parents didn't help me pack. My parents didn't pay for college or the apartment or anything. It was literally I made this transition out. They stood in the driveway and waved goodbye, and I left. And I never went back. I mean, I went back for Thanksgiving and I went back for Christmas, but I never moved back in with them. And today, it is such a different parenting dynamic. And not that my parents were the norm, but maybe they were. But parents are very much involved, in some ways, very hyper connected to their children. In some cases, and I'll admit, over connected, over helicopter parenting, things like that. And so I think it was a much larger emotional ordeal for parents today than it was for my parents, just because of the closeness, the connectivity, just modern parenting. Two generations ago, dads didn't change diapers, and now, they're expected to do half the lifting at least. So things have changed socially. So I think for me, that story of, my parents just kind of waving goodbye and I'm driving away and I'm off is so different than driving your child down to college, unpacking their things, getting their dorm room ready, shopping for them, all of those things, right?
I couldn't agree more. Mine was not any different. I mean, although I had a little transition, I had a little buffer. I moved from my little town in Germany to a bigger town. But then I took the big leap, and that was 40 years ago, where my mom was hoping, oh, after a year, she'll come back to Germany. And I'm like, no,
Yeah.
I'm staying here. But it was also, and I talked to my brother about this too. Not that parents today don't do that, but my brother said the other day, well, I don't think our dad loves us or loves me, him in particular, because he's
Mm.
still in Germany with near my parents. And I said, why do you say that? And he's like, well, he doesn't seem to show any interest in the things that I do. And he doesn't come over to my house. He's getting old and fuddy-duddy and whatnot.
Yeah.
And I said, but you know what? They raised us to be independent. They did their job. They got us off our feet. They got us out of the house into a job, into school, whatever it was. And then, because they raised us independently, it was like, okay, now step up to the plate, live
Mm.
your life. And has nothing to do with he's not loving you. I said, when you go back to him and you talk to him and you ask him for something, he will do it right away.
Yeah,
But
I think that's a great, I mean, I just think that's a great analogy, right? I think that generation especially, the whole goal was to raise your children and then launch them. And then
yep,
and then all your responsibilities are over, right? And
done.
so I think I hope today that the tethering and the communication and the family dynamic, you want to keep that going, right, as they get
Yeah.
older. But for me to, my dad was a strict person. He didn't call and say, "What are you doing?" He very much like your brother. But, the relationship you want to have with your parents in many ways depends on you and reaching out and you fostering that and trying to get what you need out of them. For me, as part of the empty nest stage, I took a purposeful look at how I wanted to engage with my children once they left. And I wanted to make sure that they knew they could come home, that they knew I cared about them, that they knew I was here for them. At the same time, letting them go a little bit, right? Letting them make their own mistakes. I'm not going to text them every 10 minutes. I'm not going to even call them the first few months they're out of the house because I want them to gain that independence and then come back to me when they're ready.
Yeah, that leads up to one of the questions I had for you is that many parents don't know what to do with themselves after the kids leave. That's one aspect, and where should they start? But it's also about how do you rekindle or rekindle the relationship with your kids during those years. So you're home, you feel lonely, and you either suck up to your kids all the time because you don't have developed your own life, or
Yeah.
you become that helicopter distance parent because you don't know what to do. What do you how do you what advice do you give? What do you think about that phase and what we should do with our kids now? And
Yeah, I mean, you hit on two things. The first one is, what can you do now that your children, and yes, refocus on the relationships. If you were spending the majority of your time as a single parent or as a couple, soccer practices and picking them up and doing all these things, now it's time for you. It's time for you to focus on the relationships with your friends, with your spouse, connect with people who you haven't connected with before. Some people view it as an opportunity to look after or dig in at work and focus more on their career. Others are finding time for themselves or pursuing hobbies. So for the individual, there are a lot of opportunities. And you've touched on these, right, in a lot of your podcasts and your blog. So there's a lot of freedom and things that people can do. With children, one of the scariest things is 1 in 4 family members in the United States is estranged from another family member. 1 in 4. So the absolute worst thing, Heike, that could ever happen to you and I would be one of our children decided they didn't want us in their life anymore, right? And this could be
right.
because they have a girlfriend who doesn't like you and is kind of turning against them. This could be because of religious beliefs. This could be because you've been controlling so hard about their grades and what's important that as soon as they leave the house and you are no longer in physical control of their routine, they rebel. So for me, I needed to land that helicopter, of my helicopter parenting before they left because I was worried that they would rebel and lose control and, dad, you no longer, have a say in everything I'm doing. So I'm going to go do it on my own. So that was one of the things that I purposely tried to do. As far as continuing connection, I mean, I did a bunch of silly things, right? I mean, yes, I do a care package. I would send them a card for St. Patrick's Day, for Valentine's Day. I still do, for Groundhog Day. It doesn't matter. I would let them know that I love them unconditionally, let them know that I'm thinking about them, uh, but not trying to insert myself into their lives. Again, I am here for you. I love you. I'm going to support you. I'm going to help you if you need it. Um, but sometimes it's best to listen and not give advice. And one last thing, I gave up. I gave up worrying about finances for them, and I gave up worrying about grades for them. So grades were such a big thing when they're going on their way to university, but in high school and the like. But once they got into university, it's no longer my business if they're failing math or they get an A, right? So I had to let that go.
Yeah.
Finances, I gave them money to go to school and to pay for rent, but that's it. right? They can spend it any way they want. They can go into debt. They cannot go into debt. I gave them enough to survive and live. So I tried to untighten all those reins that I had on them when they were teenagers and at home.
This is a good insert right here because I did basically the same thing.
Great.
When my kids were still home, I started going out salsa dancing. I fell in love with salsa. And so on the weekends, I would go out salsa dancing. And there was one day a week where I went out salsa dancing. So I developed a group of people that had same interests that I had before they even left.
Yeah, that's
And
fantastic.
and I know a lot of people miss that.
Yeah.
They're so like you helicoptering, they're so involved in school stuff and having their fingers into everything that when the kids leave, there's nothing there for them.
Yeah.
And when my son, who, like I said, he went to Johns Hopkins, got a job in Baltimore, which is near here as well, and then he drove across the country in his little Chevy Chevette to Seattle for his first job, and he lived in San Francisco for a long time.
Huh.
And he said, "Hey, mom, what are you gonna do when I'm not here?" And he said, "Pfft, you got it covered. You go salsa dancing, you're meeting your friends. I don't have to worry about you." And I want anybody listening to that here, and it's not easy. Of course, I go, "Pfft," but it's not easy to get to that point, to allow yourself that freedom and taking on something that you enjoy where they are excluded, right?
That's it. I mean, that is amazing advice. In my first book, The Empty Nest Blueprint, I focused more on couples, right? And
Hmm.
so how to reignite that spark with your spouse, how to bring forward a lot of fun things that you did, how to go to concerts and go out and play games and play cards. It doesn't really matter, but just rekindle that interest because the two of you are now cohabitating as a couple, and you haven't done that in the last 20 years because kids have been running around. The tougher situation, which I think was your situation, is the single parent. And that's
Yeah.
why I wrote the second book, The Empty Nest Blueprint for Single Parents, because being a single parent, right? There's a t-shirt calling being a single parent is my superpower. I really believe that. The amount of time and effort and focus that one person has to have raising children is amazing when you think about the tag team approach that two people have. And so
Mhm.
parenting does become so much of your day, so much of your routine. Feeding, washing, cleaning, caring, driving, chauffeuring, all of that as a single parent, it all falls on you. And then they leave. So that is a huge transition from all of these hats that you're wearing to now what? Now what is my purpose? What is my identity? What am I doing? I think it's phenomenal. Salsa, phenomenal. Getting in touch with friends, phenomenal. Building those support groups for you so you have something beyond just being a mother, just raising a child. I mean that it's in the book, but that is definitely the key to making sure you transition well.
Yeah. You described the emptiness as a chance to rebuild, not retreat. What does it look like in reality
Yeah,
or in
I think a
practice?
lot of people can move. It's easy to move to isolationism, right? It's easy. My kid's gone. I'm going to binge watch TV. I'm going to get the food I want. I can eat whenever I want. I no longer am stuck in a parenting routine. But I think at times, I think for a single parent and even for couples can just decide, okay, we're now going to go our own way. I'm going to play a bunch of golf. I'm going to go off to work. I'm going to go work out. I'm going to go do this. And so they separate, a single person all by themselves. So I find that that's retreating, right? And
Hmm.
it's not healthy, as you well know, because you've spoken on these topics and more. You want to fill your life with passion projects and energy. You want to stay healthy. It gives you an opportunity to focus on your physical health, on your mental health. It's every transition is an opportunity to kind of rewrite your book. And I love how people say you can do that at any time, but New Year's resolutions or when someone passes away or when there's a divorce or when children leave or when kids graduate from eighth grade. All of these occasions are times you can reset because it gives you an opportunity to transition during this change.
Yeah, it does. Now, what's one surprising way couples can rekindle their relationship in the empty nest years? One surprising thing.
uh, it's funny. I go into this in the book, but one of the things is, or what are we going to do? Heike, what are you and I going to do now that we're both empty nesters together? And when you think about it, there is an endless thing to do. There are endless things to do. For example, there's an exercise where you go back and it's Heike, what did you and I like doing before we had children? So before we had children, we played games, we cuddled, we camped, we went on long bike rides. And then we had children and things changed, right? We would go to parks, we would go to amusement parks, we would, I don't know, do children's activities. And now we're back, and that's the second exercise. And then the third exercise is now we're back to you and I again. So let's take all the things we enjoyed doing initially before children. Let's take all the things we enjoyed doing while having children. And then what are the other things we can do moving forward? And if you think about concerts, right? Live music, there's live music everywhere in your neighborhood, every single day, 365 days a year. There are sporting events in your neighborhood of every kind of sport that you could do, right? You can go to Groupon, you can go to other sites and just look up things to do. Glass blowing, karate, salsa dancing, joining a writer's group, going to the library, going to a bookstore. There are so many opportunities for a couple to kind of re-engage and do fun things. I think you get stuck in the routine is what are we going to watch on TV tonight? Maybe you go for a
Good point.
walk and then you go to bed. That that is, do you want to do that for the next 20, 30, 40 years of your life? No.
And people think that it has to be an audacious goal, like I'm going on vacation on big vacations all across
Right.
the world, which gets boring too after a while. And after a while, you're like, oh, I've seen everything I wanted to see. But I like the idea of exploring the small things, the bookstore, go
Yes.
to a reading, take a class, get outside of the walls and revisit the things you love doing before the kids. Because I
Yeah,
can't
and I think it's
imagine that
important
you did all of them, right?
yeah, pursue your spark as you go after of the things you love, but also find things that you both love and that you
Yeah,
can both get behind and enjoy. And so
absolutely.
make a list, again, there's an exercise, make a list. This is what I love to do. This is what we love to do. He loves to do. She, he, us. And then what else can I pull over into the us category, right? Would you want to take a dancing class? Who doesn't love going to a bookstore and just kind of perusing for an hour with a cup of coffee? I mean, that is a fun date night, and it's a fun single night because you can just focus and kind of jump into the world of books. I mean,
Yep.
there's so many things to do, right?
Yep. The sky's the limit, and people limit themselves on these. Oh, it has to be something big. It doesn't have to be anything big. It's like
Absolutely.
whatever floats your boat, and you're like, oh, let's try it out.
And you and I can't
Um,
afford to go to Japan and then Hungary. And I mean, yes, trips are great, but what can you do for little to no money and still have a very enjoyable, memory-inducing occasion, right?
so write that down, listeners. Get going on the list. The link to reach Anthony and his books will be in the show notes. But it doesn't have to be anything ginormous and big. Every little small things changes things up, and I couldn't agree with you more. So, what's one small practical shift from your book, or even from your own empty nesting, that can instantly make this transition into empty nest easier? And we're focusing a little bit on the Spark framework, which is strategic, purposeful, authentic, resilient, or knowledgeable. How would one of those tips tie into with the Spark method?
Yeah, I kind of did a self inventory on for lack of a better term, how I was showing up and supporting my wife, right? And for me, and in a traditional marriage, I think a man would come home and say, well, I earn the money for the rent, and I earn the money for the food, and I've done all of these things, and that's how I'm supporting this family. But the kids leave, and the laundry isn't Karen's job. The cooking isn't Karen's job. Vacuuming isn't Karen's job. Changing the oil, getting gas, all of those things that we were somewhat in traditional roles. Karen worked, I worked, but she was doing the majority of child rearing by day. And so she was doing the majority of taking care of the home as well. And I felt that this transition gave me an opportunity to step up. And if I want to build a better relationship with her, then I need to, you know, focus on the romance piece. Sure. I think I was pretty good with that, gifts and telling her I love her and touch, the love languages. But I wasn't really showing up in acts of service, right? So doing things such as plugging her phone in, getting her a cup of coffee when I get a cup of coffee, asking her if she wants something. Those little things to reignite our relationship, being there for her and thinking about her more now that it's just her and I for the next 30, 40, 50 years. Am I going to get mad that the shoes are sitting over here? Or no, I am going to try and be the best person I can be for her. And I fail. We all fail. I get mad. Things happen. Where's the thing you put somewhere and tidied in a drawer? But all that being said, I think putting our relationship at front and center, and I think putting yourself front and center, physically healthy, exercise, nutrition, all of those things is key.
Yeah. So what are you most excited about right now, Anthony?
Other than being on this podcast,
Yep.
uh, I this year I have the podcast Conversations with Anthony that you should all listen to after you listen to Heike's podcast. So that is an exciting endeavor for me this year. I'm back in the library. I go to the library a few times a week and write. So I'm thinking about doing maybe some fiction writing. We'll see. Exploring some other avenues. And so that's Anthony. I think the other exciting thing is my eldest son got engaged. So there
Yay.
is a wedding in my future, Heike, which means, that is, I like having a trip out in the horizon that I could look forward to. And the wedding is obviously a monumental family occasion that I'm looking forward to.
This is so exciting. I love having things to look forward to. We're expecting our second grandchild this month
Oh
in
gosh,
February. So we have number two on the way, one in the oven.
that's amazing. I'm looking for. I don't want that phase to happen yet because Grace, Zoe, and Everest are still pretty young. But I am going to be an awesome grandparent.
Anthony, thank you so much for coming on the show and talking about all this most important emptiness that so many people fear and struggle with. And it can be so much fun as you outlined for us.
Thank you so much. And thank you for, I think we share similar audiences, right? Wanting to help people 50 plus. You're focusing on women, but really many of the things that you talk about relate to men, right? I mean, I know you're focusing on women, but all of these topics about getting healthy, exercising, finding your spark, pursuing your spark, these are things men need to do as well. So thank you for focusing on my demographic, 50 and up.
Thank you. Take care.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye.